so much for joining us today. We are Julia Torres and
JoEllen McCarthy.
And we are here representing the Educator Collaborative in our role as book ambassadors. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are going to be in conversation for Giving Tuesday, just to give you some of our thoughts, and we hope that you'll share yours too in the comments. As we kind of process what it means to be in this moment of book banning, but more so wanting to continue to share enthusiasm around book love and book joy and book buzzes during this giving holiday season. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and share some slides with you as a way to frame our thinking. And we hope to hear from you in the comments, like we said.
Yeah. And don't forget that you can email us at any time through the Educator Collaborative or to our personal emails, because as Julia just said, we wanted to spend time today reminding everyone on this Giving Tuesday that it's about giving time, it's about giving love, it's about giving energy, and really being able to give space to this conversation. One of the things that we have talked about endlessly over at the Educator Collaborative is, like it says on the screen, that the right to read day is really every day. So just as Giving Tuesday is today, and on the 28th, for those of you who are not watching this live, we want to remember to be considerate of giving to this space and really honoring the opportunity and access for choice and kids' opportunity to read and to read every day what they want and they can.
Yeah, and as we said, we are going to talk just briefly about book banning because that is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, both educators and librarians. We wanted to give you a few resources. One of them is an infographic that comes from PEN America, which addresses the fact that still the majority of the stories that are banned are from featuring protagonists of color and LGBTQ plus characters and topics. And then there are other additional topics that are frequently banned. If you're already familiar with that conversation, then you can click on any of these QR codes for some thoughtful and proactive ways to respond to book challenges. There's an action toolkit as well. So we gathered together some of our favorite resources. The reason that we wanted to talk about book banning briefly is because of some of the things that have been happening with major publishers, but then also because we want to recognize that book banning is a symptom of illiteracy, when you can read, but you don't. And so many young people, there are many statistics, Pew Research Center has some online, that show that as young people get older in middle and high school, they stop reading for pleasure. And we will probably see some similar statistics with adults. People stop reading for pleasure. And part of the reason that so many books are under fire is because people have not read them. They haven't read them in their entirety. And we want to do our part to help change that. JoEllen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add is, if you notice, some of the resources are things that we have shared before. And part of why we wanted to have this conversation today is because this should be an ongoing conversation. We shouldn't just be talking about banning books when something happens or during banned book week. And so one of the resources that we'll also remind you of is the resource that was provided at the closing of this year's gathering in the fall, where there were opportunities to discuss ways to be advocates and ways to really focus on self-care in this space when books are being banned and when there is legislation in over 30 states that are really making not only individuals be in harm's way because of that censorship, but also those individuals who are advocating for kids being in harm's way because of that censorship. So we definitely want you to know and to be reminded of those resources. And as Julia just said, the opportunity to continue to reflect on being advocates, being joyful, and finding ways to celebrate books and celebrate kids. And in not just a celebration, but really a fight, because this is an opportunity really where we have to be mindful of supporting one another as we are in this fight for kids and fight for books. But we have to be mindful of ways to be advocating for ourselves and self-care as well. So those are resources that we will be going back to again. And we also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the opportunity to think of the wonderful words of Michelle Obama, where she talks about books as invitations. And that's something that well, she doesn't say books as invitations. She says, let's invite one another in, that maybe we can begin to fear less, to make fewer wrong assumptions, to let go of the biases and stereotypes that unnecessarily divide us. And Julia and I say that books are invitations. We again and again refer to books as our co-teachers and as opportunities to learn about ourselves, others, and the world. And so it's really important. And I know, Julia, you are someone who was fortunate enough to write the Adapted Young Readers Teachers Edition for this book. So you really are the expert on taking some of her words and her work and putting into pedagogy and practice, which is why I love learning from you and with you as well.
Thank you so much for dropping a hint to the Educator Guide. I was really honored to be able to create it. And one of the things that it focuses on is Mrs. Obama's focus on education as a galvanizing force. Her family were big readers and big on education, and she shares that with the world and with her own children. So in Becoming, something that I learned was the value of education for someone like Mrs. Obama, and hopefully all of us have future leaders in our classrooms. I know that we did before COVID, and I know that we do now. So we know that books are invitations to the unknown world, but also invitations to parts of yourself that you might not discover in any other way. So we are going to talk about a few books that we recommend, as this is Giving Tuesday coming up. We wanted to just shout out these books because we thought maybe folks might want to order them and give them to people in their lives who need a little bit of a reminder of how great this time is that we're living in, a time when there is such a plethora of representation and so many different stories that would historically have been marginalized or underrepresented, that are being amplified and shared throughout the world. So we have a few books that we want to shout out, and then we also want to just shout out at the end a couple of organizations that we recommend if people are wondering who they can support, if you are book lovers just like us.
Fabulous. And we also want to remind our viewers about the statement, the very thoughtful statement that was created by our colleagues at the Educator Collaborative to focus on proactive book banning resources, and really in response to a position statement. I mean, they created a position statement in response to what was happening in the world with the so-called diverse titles that were segregated from Scholastic. So thinking about that, if and I apologize, I forgot to put the QR code, but I'm sure we can have Chris add that in on this slide resource deck, because it's super important to be thinking about how, you know, we really believe in intellectual freedom, and we believe in opportunity, and we reject all methods of soft censorship and censorship as a whole. And it's important that we're standing alongside authors and illustrators and colleagues who are really being faced with a lot of challenges. And so part of what we did when we put this together was we were reflecting on some of the books and some of the individuals who were impacted by Scholastic's decision. So on this slide, you notice that you can see Emma Otegi, who is a friend of the TheEdCollab and has been involved in several of our sessions. Certainly you're welcome to find those resources on the archive as well. But there's even an article that she wrote for SLJ with her personal response to what happened to her as the creator of a story that was put onto that separate shelf. And I think that we hope that you will view this resource that Julia and I are providing as, again, an opportunity to extend the conversation and perhaps pause and reconsider and look at some of the resources that we are mentioning, to revisit again and to be able to arm all of us with information to help us as we help kids.
Really good point that individuals who are people who are alive today are impacted by our purchasing decisions. So that's part of the reason why we wanted to put this together to help people make informed decisions about the vote, so to speak, that you put forward when you make a purchase of a title, either for a school or for as an individual to give to another individual.
Absolutely. And again, not just thinking about specific titles, but thinking about our pedagogy and our practice and thinking about ways that we can be supporting and affirming not only the experience, the lived experience, the language, the opportunity to celebrate cultures, to celebrate kids, and to think about the ways in which we can center the voices and decenter whiteness and decenter some of what has happened in practice in schools, which is why we're facing these challenges right now today. We have a lot of growing to do as a nation, and we continue to learn and grow because we can do better. So we wanted to provide some additional resources that will remind you not only about the books, but about the ways that we are having conversations around the books, as Julia and I always say.
On that note, I was lucky enough to be able to curate some collections for high school. You can just search Penguin Random House Education High School Collections, and you will see some curated lists that were created by myself and four other educators, Lorena Herman, Cicely Lewis, Morgan Taylor, and Ronelle Whitaker. We also have curriculum guidance, so some lesson plans and other information inside each of the booklets that comes with the purchase of a collection. So if you're wondering how to get on the train of diversifying your texts, these are two examples of high school collections, and I think that there are middle grade ones as well. What I really like about these collections is that we chose books that we knew would be not only accessible, but also high interest for readers. So even if you just purchased one of these sets for your district and then shared it in the district so that you could do sort of a pilot reading where educators could read and see what they think before ordering a whole bunch for different schools throughout the district, I think that would be a worthy experience or a worthwhile experience. Please keep in mind that Penguin Random House has these curated collections. There are also many books by other publishers out there in the world that are inclusive and are high interest and are accessible. I just have not had the chance to curate collections for those yet. So I was really lucky to be able to work with these four, and you'll find our high school collections out there in the world. Just give Penguin Random House High School or House Education High School Collections a search, and it should come right up.
Fabulous. I love that we have that as a resource as well. One of the other things, as we're mentioning some titles and some creators and some individuals and some resources, I wanted to call to mind a beautiful picture book, I Am My Ancestors' Wildest Dreams, which was one of the books that was put on the separate shelf. And so it brings to mind, again, the opportunity for our teachers, our families, our communities to be focusing on books and texts that really are, as we said, thinking about the beauty and the brilliance of all individuals and all of our children. And so highlighting a professional title by some friends, the culturally sustaining language and literacy practice for pre-K to 3 classrooms. There's a text that's beautiful, The Children Come Full, written by Dr. Kendall Turner Nash, Alicia R.C. Boardman, Roderick Peel, and Carrie Elson, that has some great resources, again, to have these same conversations and teacher guides and teacher opportunities to think about the ways that we can expand the way that we are using books as co-teachers in our classroom to celebrate and to also learn and connect literacy to these practices and to really affirm who our children are and all that they have to offer in this world. And when we use books and we have stories, that's a way that we can consider and protect our children in this way. So, on that note,
Here, for some reason, I think that our slides might have gone out of order. I have a slide that number 12, if
oh,
you
I'm
wouldn't
sorry.
mind going to number 12. Yeah, that's okay. Number 12 shows the top 10 most challenged books of 2021, 2020 and 2022. If you look closely, you will see that not a whole lot has changed. The bluest eye is on all three lists. It looks like The Hate You Give is on two. It looks like Sherman Alexie is on all three. It looks like Speak is also on, oh no, Speak is on one list. But if you look at them, there's very little variation in what people are finding objectionable. And so what I have done is picked some read alikes that go along with some of the books that are on this list. Because if you've heard of all of the books on this list, which many people have, young people might be looking for books that are similar in tone, theme, topic, but are not the exact same titles as those on these lists. So if we'll go to slide 13, I've got a couple of read-alikes, Flamer and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Those two are very similar to, they'll have some similar topics as ones that were on the 2021 list and I believe 2022. The students in front of you are represented in these stories. So believe it or not, though these stories are not autobiographical to a kid that's sitting in front of you, a student will see themselves in these books. So you can ask any librarian, I'm not the only one who can do this, but any librarian to find a read alike for titles on the banned books list, or the list that was circulated earlier by Scholastic of titles that are segregated. So that's just something that I wanted to shout out. Flamer and The Perks of Being a Wallflower have been requested and suggested by young people. I have a copy of The Perks of Being a Wallflower in my garage that a young person gave to me because it was his most treasured possession. So please consider going to your librarian or your local library and requesting read-alikes. And then slide 15 has more read-alikes that go along with, I think I chose read-alikes for Speak and All American Boys for this one, perhaps, or maybe high school read-alikes for, I can't remember right now exactly what I was matching them with, but these are additional read-alikes, I think, for titles from the banned books list.
Yeah, I love that because we are constantly talking about books and we're constantly adding and changing and curating resources for teachers. And so Julie and I put things together, and we want to remind you again that it's not about the book, but it's about the books that we're using and how we're using them, the ways that we're using them to support kids and to also offer choice to kids, right? So are we using books that honor? Are we using books that also celebrate joyful experiences? And, you know, it's really harmful. And I think it might be a good opportunity to talk about this opportunity here where we put in a slide to remind folks about the dangers of heritage celebrations that are, you know, when people are choosing books or selecting texts focused on heroes and holidays. And so if we think about this idea of giving, what are we doing to give books that celebrates and honor the heritage of a variety of individuals all throughout the year? So for example, we have two fabulous books by Indigenous creators. The My Powerful Hair, which is by Carol Lindstrom, and I apologize because I have it on my shelf and I can't read the illustrator's name. And I apologize about that. And then we have Monique Gray Smith's I Hope, illustrated by Gabrielle Grimard. And I think those are just two examples that are beautiful books that we should be using in our classroom all year long. And I know Julia has some thoughts to add to this as well.
Yes. So thinking about heritage celebrations, I think that it's very important to recognize that those of us who represent historically marginalized and underrepresented groups appreciate seeing our heritages pop up at not obvious times. So, for example, my library system has decided to recognize the Afro-Caribbean contribution to jazz during a time when there's going to be a jazz festival in Colorado. I believe it's in June. It also happens to overlap with some Juneteenth stuff, but it's not happening all in February. So just wanted to contribute that piece, and then also remind people, as we're reminding you of books that you can purchase for this Giving Tuesday, that it's always a beautiful thing to give somebody a gift that shows that you recognize um, a a heritage group that they might belong to, but we always want to be careful not to make assumptions. You should have asked the person or connected with them on a personal level before handing them a book about a story that they may or may not relate to. I want to go back to slides 16 and 17 really quickly, just because I've got more book recommendations that are read alikes with books that you probably already know about. Slide 16 has All American Boys and Speak, two books on the banned books list or that have been banned historically. And then slide 17 are books that you might consider giving as gifts or purchasing this year. Punching the Air is phenomenal and very, very, very important in terms of a book that promotes social action. In this case, it is those that are wrongfully incarcerated, young Black boys, and the rates of incarceration for our young Black boys, also sometimes the school to prison pipeline. How it went down is connected thematically. So consider any of these books. Ask your librarian, your local librarian, if you're looking for more information, or you can do what I do. Sometimes I just go to Goodreads and read what other people have said about a book if I'm trying to decide if I want to pick it up or not. So speaking of social action, I think that we had a couple more slides. I'll turn it over to JoEllen.
Yeah, I wanted to put and highlight I Am Ruby Bridges, which was written by Ruby Bridges herself on her experience as a child, and it was illustrated by Nicholas Smith. And I just absolutely love this image and this page so much because I think it illustrates the point that the way and the really brilliant way it was written in focusing on the importance and the wordplay in her name and about how she is a bridge, that her experience and what she did. And in fact, I want to stop sharing and show you my screen because there is an image that was actually reprinted out as one of the most beautiful art pieces from the text that shows this idea of the bridge that is created when we come together to support one another. And the fabulous Nicholas Smith, who created that. And I'll go back to that screen for a moment because what he did is he also created a book recently that was called The Artivist. And so using his talents as an artist and thinking about experience of giving opportunity for kids to think about the ways in which all children can use their voice, their art, their words, their experiences to make change in the world. And so, in this example from Ruby Bridges, which I Am Ruby Bridges is one of the books that has been banned or has been segregated on that separate list. I think it's important to be thinking about the ways that we can use books, as Nicholas Smith says, books and art as a path that allows for healing, equity, and inclusion. And it also brings to mind the picture book Change Sings by the talented Amanda Gorman and illustrated by Lauren Long. And I think we have to consider to think about the fact that books build bridges. I know Julia and I wanted to remind everyone that we all have things to do in this world and to grow and to be better and to change. And Scholastic themselves, they recounted, I guess, their decision, and they sent a letter updating everyone about their decisions and how they wanted to change. And I think it's important that people are looking at that and recognizing, their commitment or their attempt now to, I guess, I'm having at a loss of words here, but trying to think about ways that they can still be mindful of the fact that their decision was harmful and that they know that and they're moving forward. And so if we're thinking about all of the ways that we can move forward, we want to be reminded about the Freedom to Read Foundation, some of the resources that we talked about, the American Library Association, NCTE has a position statement on book banning. We at the EdCollab have a position statement on book banning, and there's a lot of work to be done. But ending on a note of a picture book that reminds us about keeping hope alive and doing the best we can. There's a beautiful book that's a story, a folk tale that's been told in many, many ways with different versions. The Courage of the Little Hummingbird. And that is a tale told around the world. This happens to be a newer version by Leah Henderson and illustrated by Magale Morales. And it really is important to be thinking about how we all just have to move forward in trying to do the best that we can. Even when you think it's the littlest of acts, we want to remember that it's most important because it's those little acts that come together to make big change.
Amen. Very well stated. I think that we'll leave it here, but we want to remind you that we are available as a resource. If you have more questions or are curious to hear about title suggestions that will advance the cause of intellectual freedom, we also have our books, Layers of Learning and Liven Up Your Library, that are available for purchase if you are looking to do any kind of professional development within your systems. And then we have on the EdCollab website the Ask a Book Ambassador button, where you can ask us questions. As JoEllen mentioned earlier, we are available all the time, pretty much. I mean, well, not all the time, but off and on, we'll be available to answer your questions if you have them. And we hope that you will see this as a call to action to purchase and gift books that will inspire young people to see themselves as more than they might just through television or the million ways that we fill our time. There's some really unique and beautiful stories that are being told in today's picture books, middle grade and YA, and we hope that we've presented a few of them here for you today for your consideration. Please remember to support intellectual freedom through the American Library Association, or to just challenge those around you to do more than put up book displays of banned books. We can do more, and Giving Tuesday is an opportunity for us to engage in that work.
Yes, and please feel free, take advantage of all of the resources that are available to you at the Educator Collaborative. Revisit some of the sites and the sessions that we mentioned, because you will find opportunities there to go back, to continue this conversation with your colleagues, and to be able to support one another as advocates, as book loving friends, and just as resources to center kids and care in this world. So thanks for spending time with us on Giving Tuesday. We hope that you enjoy reading many, many books, and please keep in touch with us.
Yes, take good care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.